given what we've seen, given the gap between the unbanked and the underbanked, between men and women, we thought it would be a good opportunity to really hear from two people who've been doing this for a while and see whether there are any lessons we can learn and draw for financial institutions from what we see in other industries. So let's start off with Suneet. And if you would just talk to us about, how did it come about that women became the target segment for you, and how you embarked on this journey?
Sure. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having us here. I'm really impressed by what I've seen here, and while I'm not an expert in financial services or banking, I really am impressed by the fact that you have Debra and I here from a different industry altogether, Unilever and Pfizer, because we have, in our company, in our history, and in our go-to-market approaches, made it a point of targeting women as part of our marketing and product offerings, and also penetrating different parts of the socioeconomic pyramid, from A class, B, C, D, and E. So it's something that we've been doing for a long time. And as I listen to the presentations, I see that there are things that we can learn from all of you, and I think there are things, hopefully, that you'll be able to take away from us as well. Just a moment on Pfizer, then we need to get to your question. So at Pfizer, specifically, I'm part of the consumer healthcare business, which is everything that is not requiring a prescription. So we are a high-touch business in the sense that we sell hundreds of millions of units of healthcare products a year to households around the world. Our mission is to put health and wellness into the hands of consumers themselves, empowering them to look after their own well-being. I think what's really exciting for us is that women have been at the heart of what we do for a number of years. It is well documented that women make between 2/3 and 3/4 of the healthcare decisions for themselves and for their families. And health and well-being of themselves and the people around them is core to their perception of having a better life, or having, quote unquote, the good life. So while financial is important, health and well-being is also important. And that's something that motivates us within Pfizer Consumer Healthcare, and why targeting women has become so core to everything we do. If I could go one step further, what we've learned over the years that has really reinforced this point of view is that women are the influencers. Women influence other women, and women influence men. And they do it to a greater degree than men do to other men, and then to a greater degree than men do to other women. So in fact, as you think about that, really you can see why it's at the core of our mission and what we do, and why it's so important to the better life. That's what has really embodied the mission of what we do in our business. So.
Great. Women are the influencers, women are the core to Pfizer. Let's hear from you, Debra, in terms of how you see this in the African context for personal care.
Great. When I was invited to attend this particular session in targeting the new growth segment, women, my first question was, am I here as a woman, or am I here as Unilever? And then I figured the answer was something like both, but it would be helpful to bring in the Unilever perspective. So on that note, when you think about Unilever, 70% of our purchasing decisions are actually by women. 70%, whether it's buying or influencing, 70%. Now, to put that into some perspective, our turnover last year was something like 48.6 billion euros, 70% of that influenced by women. So it's a no-brainer. Women are our market. They are our emerging market. And when you look at what the size of women in today's global economy is, it's double the combination of China and India. So really, it is a new emerging market. And any business looking into the future will leave billions of dollars on the table if they do not target women. So that in itself, new growth market, it's an opportunity any business today should get behind.
Thank you. And I think everybody in the room here is on point for why financial services products need to be rolled out to women. I think there's a common agenda here, and it's great to see that women are such a core part of your business. But I think the reason we're here today as well is that it's not always such an easy thing to do. And so, Suneet, what would be good to understand is, what is it that you did? How did you actually take on this challenge as Pfizer to make your products accessible to women?
Sure. And let me put it into two contexts. One is women as the target, but also middle and lower parts of the pyramid. Those are two simultaneous journeys that we have been embarking on for a long time, although I should say we're farther along with women than we are with the middle of the pyramid, but both are challenges. I think the first thing we did, and I'm going to talk from a business perspective, being a global general manager, we did have to make the case, okay, the business case for why it matters. And that's something that's very important in any enterprise to say, can I achieve the company's goals by targeting these segments? And the goals are growth, the goals are sustainable growth over a long period of time, they are profitable growth. And I'm pleased to say, in virtually every case study we've embarked upon within our organization, women or other segments of the pyramid, we've been able to clearly make that case. And that is a fundamental precursor in any business, financial or otherwise, to actually making such a change happen. Then what we did is we said, okay, now that we have this case, we're going to embed this into our strategy. So it actually becomes a strategic imperative that we want to target and move towards realizing this true opportunity. And that becomes not a sideline activity, but a core activity then to your own business. It's fundamental to the way that we operate. And once you do that, other natural things flow from that. So for example, then you need the dedicated structures to support and attain those objectives. You need the governance. You need all the things that big companies have to make it a reality. And that flows from that business case and that strategy. If I could be more specific, Lohini. So that was sort of a macro view, but here's a micro view. Where that's taken us in our journey is, now we make products, okay, like Centrum or Caltrate or Advil or Nexium and Chapstick, Preparation H, Dimetapp. You may know Robitussin. You may know many of these brands in your own markets. What we had to do once we had that imperative and that mission is to actually change our offerings. Because the offerings that we had were very good for a broad target, especially the tippy top of the pyramid, say the A and the top of the B class, but they weren't necessarily giving us the gender value that we wanted, nor were they giving us the C, D, and E classes that we wanted. So we specifically looked at what changes to our approach we could make at the micro level. And micro means what are the changes we make to our products, and what are the changes we make to our marketing approach. And if I could just go into that. So what changes can you make in your product? One is, it's as simple as small sizes. So for us, I can sell a 300 count Centrum in Canada for $30, or I can sell a 2-week supply for $2 in the Philippines. And so actually something as simple as that, making the out-of-pocket or the pickup price more accessible to more consumers allows us to have that impact. But we had to actually consciously make that change to say, what do the consumers in these target segments want? We are consumer-led, not product-led. In this case, we reconfigured the product to meet the consumer need. That's one example. We can also change our formulas, so Centrum can have 25 ingredients in Canada. It can have 12 ingredients in the Philippines, because that also makes the product more accessible and more foundational to health. We can change the branding. And I've seen airlines do this. There could be a high-priced airline, and there could be a budget brand airline. So there's lots of things we did to change our product approach. But we also changed our marketing approach. So while we may do television advertising and mass media, that appeals to a lot of people. Specifically for women in middle of the pyramid, we also changed our go-to-market approach in terms of digital, because we can be much more targeted. And we find that cell phones and other digital media are actually more accessible to larger parts of the population. And we actually use more social connectors. In other words, there are people in various communities that influence other people, and women to a large degree play these roles. So in fact, we would layer on additional tactics to change our marketing approach. So all the way from the business case to the strategy of how we set the tone for our organization structurally, and then all the way down to reaching down to how we're going to change our products, how we're going to change our marketing approach. So the tactics and the execution are best suited to realize the opportunity. And that's kind of how we went about it.
So thinking through the products, tailoring them to the market, but also thinking about how you communicate and market. Debra, before I come to you, let me just remind the audience to submit questions. If you have questions, as we've done in the previous, please submit your questions, and then we'll have a chance to also to put these to the panelists. Debra.
On the question of how do we engage with women, I think Unilever's mission is to improve the lives of the people and communities in everywhere that they serve. That's our straightforward and basic mission. And then looking at that, the role, I think earlier on in some other presentations this morning, somebody said that something like 90%, when a woman earns income, 90% of it goes into improving her household, her family, her extended family, and her community, and a lot less for men. When you take that stat, one of the things that becomes imperative is for any business to build a sustainable business in where they operate. It is really, really inevitable that you do have to lift the status of women in the markets that you're in, because the effect of that is, the ripple effect is enormous. So in terms of some of the principles in which we went about engaging women, one of the key ones, I encourage everybody to really, really understand women as a target consumer and as a people who are interested in your goods. I think we had a great session earlier today. Actually, a number of the sessions were about spending money on research. We spent about €1 billion annually on research and development, but that's because we really want to understand the consumer, not just from the perspective of the products in which she buys, but who is she, what drives her, what motivates her. It becomes really, really key. Many businesses have learned expensive lessons by assuming it's just a gender issue. There's men and there's women. I remember there was a computer company that decided that, okay, we'll target women. So what will they do? Straightforward, we'll create pink computers. The backlash was enormous. Yeah? That is stereotype. Women don't like pink, soft, and frilly. Don't assume that. Learn what they want. So really understand who your consumer is. Again, there was a discussion earlier today about, so do you own your customer? And I really loved that discussion about, do you own your customer? A little simple principle: don't ever tell a woman that you own them. Don't ever tell a woman that you own them. Actually, you need to get into a relationship with women. Yeah? When women love their brands or their products, I guarantee you they're in a relationship with their brands or their products. They will tell you, I love it, I cannot do without it, I've got to have it. It's not just about how much it costs. Create the love, and you will have a loyal consumer with you for life. Women can be more loyal than men. Create the love. The other thing I always say is, understand her influence of power. Really understand her influence of power. It's not just at the point of sale. Really understand that she can make a real difference. So, from the simple perspective of how you talk to them, yeah? Messaging and languaging. How many times have you bought a product, look at the back of the product, and you don't understand a word of what it says? And it's supposed to be a product for everybody, a mass consumer product. I won't say much about the financial industry because until today, even I don't understand a word of quite a bit of what happens in there. So, simple languaging. Actually, as Unilever, we've learned, or been forced to learn, that speak simply. Don't tell guys about efficacy. They don't know what you're talking about. Just tell them it works, it's great, it'll make you look beautiful. They will come. Speak simply. Just the other day, I lost my luggage, my favorite story this week. And I went online and there was a message about give you a 10-digit code. And I said, what 10-digit code? So I called them. And they said, are you a frequent flyer? Yes. What is your frequent flyer number? And I said, why don't you just tell me that? Ask me for the number. Vodacom had a great example here with their M-Pesa product. They will never ask you for the 10-digit code, they'll just ask you for your mobile number. Great lesson, we have learned. from companies like that. And a lesson for when we get into the financial segment, speak simply, let them understand. Imagery is great. Appreciate the similarities and the differences. Yeah, when I say similar, irrespective of income, irrespective of geography, there are three things that are similar about women. All of them are time conscious, time bound. Time is always an issue. Money is always an issue. Well-being is always an issue, irrespective of where in the world. Gentlemen, those are three things all women are the same about: time, money, well-being. But there are differences. Life stage creates differences. Millennial women think completely different from older women. I mean, they'll push education and marriage much later to build a career. So appreciate the differences. I spoke to avoiding stereotypes. Don't assume pink, soft, frilly doesn't work, especially in today's world. Grow with her and grow with her changes. Yeah? Learn what she wants, get behind that. Build a relationship, don't own them. Those are pretty much some of the principles we've been talking about. Those are powerful words.
Can I add on one point?
Are you going to add on to what she said?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, and because I love how she said, here are the ways that are the same, but they're different also. And I couldn't agree with that more, because we have seen very big differences between women target consumers in different markets, and based on income level, based on education, based on marital status. And this is a story, just very quickly, about where we failed once. And because we didn't realize or appreciate that difference. So I used the example of Centrum. Now we have many brands, but I'm going to use that. It is our best-selling product in the world. And we love it, and we thought, okay, now let's sell this to many more parts of the income pyramid. But then what we found is we moved down, it failed. It didn't sell well at all. And we said, how could this be that A-class and B-class women are loving this product, but C, D, and E are not? And what we realized is that A and B class have a long-term outlook on health and well-being, and they have the, I don't want to say luxury, but they can afford to think about their long-term health. Whereas when you get into C, D, and E, it's more about immediate need state. They have to get to work, their families have to earn money, maybe they have 2 jobs. Treating a pain or getting a good sleep is much more important. So what we found is the best-selling products for women in C, D, and E might have been melatonin or a pain reliever. But in fact, when you go to A and B, the best-selling might have been Centrum for long-term health. And what we found is that we absolutely failed by thinking what would work with A and B would also work C, D, and E with the same woman target at the macro level, but really when you look at it, there's quite a big difference. And so we actually had to change our approach and say, be consumer-led. The C or D woman is different than the A and B. And how do we change our approach? So absolutely they're similar, I get that, but there are also, as you pointed out rightly, key differences.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pick up as well on one of the points you made, Deborah, which you said, build the relationship, build the love, establish that connection. And let's talk about some of the practical ways in which you could do that, because obviously building this relationship is a bit of a journey, and it involves multiple steps.
One of the big things we have learned as a business and applied as a business is the concept of not expecting women to come to you, you go to them. I.e., we join your circle. Yeah, we join the circle of women. We don't wait for them to come to us. We join their circle. Now, somebody again said earlier today about the principle of women taking opinions from each other. I tell you, women use other women as experts and voices of advice. Yeah, everywhere across the world. Developing and emerging. A woman will ask another woman, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And if the other woman says, I would never go near it, it's a mess, it's etc., trust me, the other woman won't do it again. So the whole concept of joining a circle is about acknowledging that women use each other as experts, and word of mouth is extremely powerful when it comes to marketing to women. Extremely powerful. So in terms of strategies, what does that mean, irrespective of where you are? In terms of strategies, it's as simple as digital strategies, yeah? Because online, women share a lot about what they're buying, selling, using, marrying. They share all that. Yeah? So other women listen online. So your digital strategy is really, really key, because that's where the women are. Join your circle, join them, get into the conversation and understand what it is they want and where they're going, and offer that to them as a solution. So digital strategy becomes really, really big. The other key learning, being in the consumer packaged goods, we work closely with retailers, that there was a concept or perception that in emerging markets, with the whole rise of hypermarkets and the modern trade, the traditional trade will fall apart. And by the traditional trade, I mean kiosks, corner shops, small groceries, open markets will fall. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that. Yeah? They're actually both growing. And the reason when you're not seeing that is, again, when you're looking to engage with women, women look for advice and want to build a relationship with the product. And what do you get in the traditional trade? Actually, in the traditional trade, whether it's the open market, it's a one-on-one customer service. You and the owner are actually quite close. They know you, they know what you want, they will offer you, they'll tell you about the product. So it's like a one-on-one consultancy in the traditional trade. You don't get that in the hypermarket. Hypermarket, you just figure out what you know and you buy it. But there they will tell you, and they will influence what you buy, and you will really trust the retailer in the open market or the kiosk, etc. Because they'll tell you, don't try this, doesn't work, go for this one. So it's just the simple things of what you do on ground and online when it comes to targeting women that are really, really key. Just some basic principles that can make a huge difference in what you do. And there's just some of the little learnings that we've built as an industry in engaging with women.
If I could add on that as well. I think what's really key, and I mentioned also the digital up front, is that I don't know if financial institutions or banks do this, but we actually engage pretty heavily in social listening. So those connectors that we're both referring to, the people who influence other people, the online forums that they're a part of, we actually have, I'm sure Unilever has the same thing as we do, which is we're tapped in and listening and we're engaging and we're openly disclosing, we're there, so we're not violating any confidences, but we get the voice of the consumer. And I think of that as key to how we operate in the consumer healthcare space. I can imagine it's key for Unilever also. I wonder sometimes if banks or financial institutions do that. And if you're looking at targeting either different socioeconomic pyramid sections or you're looking at women, are your marketing and commercial development teams doing that? It's a very simple thing, as Debra pointed out, but it's something that can immediately give you an insight that you might not have had before. Oftentimes I've been in rooms where we debate on, what should we say, what should we do, what do they think? Maybe you can just ask them, and they will tell you. And it's a very simple but powerful way to start.
I think the point around technology not only being an enabler for product or distribution, but also getting closer to your customer, understanding your customer and building the community is important. And will provide an interesting insight. In terms of how you actually make the shift, I'm assuming that even Pfizer, Unilever at some point made a shift when they realized that women were the core, because I'm assuming that this has happened over time. And I'm also thinking to banks which are more, established operations, have a way about doing things. I'm assuming that getting to know this customer, changing the way requires some change to happen within the organization. So would love to hear, what are some of the changes? I know you talked about the business case, but what are some of the things that you had to change structurally and organizationally to get behind women as a segment?
Sure. Let me say that when Lohini and I met, which I got to see your presentation yesterday on the McKinsey report, which was very informative, a lot of the benchmarking data they had was external, but in fact, Pfizer's challenge was not external, it was internal. Our biggest barrier to realizing the opportunities, either with women or with different parts or segments of the pyramid, was internal. In the past, some marketing manager or some leader in some part of the organization said, we have a spark of an idea. And they would present that idea as part of an overall business plan. And then someone in senior management would say, that's a great idea. Why don't you work on that in your spare time? Why don't you make that a special project? Why don't we get 2 high potential, talented individuals to work on that as an extra assignment? And what we found is that you had a short burst of activity because there was enthusiasm and short-term endorsement. But after 3 months or 6 months, it was over. And then a year or 2 later, somebody would come up with the same spark of an idea, and the cycle would repeat. And again, 1 or 2 years later, it would be over. So we found that after 6 years, or 7 years, or 10 years, whatever the time is, we had really accomplished very little. Maybe in one place you had done one thing. But as a global enterprise, both Pfizer and Unilever, that's not systematic change. That is not institutional change. So we had to actually fundamentally take that on within our company and say, this is important. We're going to not only put it as a business case and make a strategic imperative to pursue this, but we are also going to change our structure to dedicate people and resources at the center, in the regions, and in the markets to actually realize and go after this opportunity. And that was the biggest chunk of time, I'd say, that we lost. And our failures informed our current success. We're still on the journey, of course. We're not where we would like to be, but I'm really pleased with the progress we've made. So it's amazing because you think, oh, it's external. How do we do this? How do we do that? No, it was internal. And I don't know if that's the case in many organizations here, but changing the internal approach was our biggest challenge.
I think when you look at it from a Unilever perspective, a lot of similarities. I think the biggest shift we had to make was from strategy into action. It's always the hardest. Strategy was there. It was actually just getting it done. It's easy, yeah, just getting it done. And there almost a 5-point step that we called out. 1, if you're going to get behind this huge emerging market called women, it is really, really helpful to have a gender-balanced organization where these women who you're serving actually work for you. And some of the stuff that they already know is within the organization because women already know some of that stuff. So gender balance in organization is a key initiative in Unilever. I think we're around 45% now and still pushing it to really get to a truly gender-balanced organization. 2, empowering women through the value chain. By that I mean, let me give an example. In India, we have a project Shakti, which we're now rolling out to several emerging markets. Now, what we've discovered, as many of us tend to do, is the urban markets became really saturated, competition was intensifying, but we still have an objective of driving growth. So we had to start cracking the rural markets, which are always quite complex, difficult infrastructure, hard to communicate, etc. So what we did, we actually recruited Shaktis, women in the rural areas, 10 to 15, form a group, create an agency. We got in touch with a microfinance organization to help support them with loans. And that group actually become entrepreneurs, and that 10 to 15 of them in every village go out and sell our products to the women in the village in which they're from. I mean, it was a rather simple initiative. Today, in India alone, there are 45,000 Shaktis or entrepreneurs who actually have a base of 3 million customers and are delivering about 15% of total Unilever turnover in India and growing. That was such a success, rolled out globally into emerging markets. It's just get women into your value chain because women trust other women. They can get into your homes and talk about products. So that's 2. The 3 is access to training and skills. Yeah? Empower women, skills, train them up, upskill them, and that helps the whole multiplier effect. 4, innovate products that improve lives, whether it's size, format, usage, innovate products that truly improve lives of women, and they will come. And then lastly, driving women's economic empowerment through our brands. So there are many initiatives that we do through our brands that really go behind driving well-being. Many of you, for example, know the whole Dove initiative. Dove is one of our fastest growing brands, not just because it's Dove, but it's truly out there to build the self-esteem of women. And that is why women come. So those 5-point strategies, we clearly called it out. It's about now landing it in what we do. So it does require organizational shift in how you look at yourself internally and externally.
So if you were, because I think these are all, excellent points. It's not just about there's this opportunity around women, just to play back what you're saying, right? So it's not just about, yes, there's an opportunity to offer products to women, but really thinking about changing the DNA of the organization to go after this opportunity will be critical, both from an external perspective, but also internally making sure that we have, that you actually have the voice of women within the organization is important. I'm just going to take a quick look here at some of the questions that we've been getting from the audience. So one of the questions is, which is an interesting one, and maybe just to take a shift a little, because we've heard a lot about how important women are, that they are influencers. I think, and you also just referred to the McKinsey report, which says on the power of parity, that there's still a huge shift to be made in all regions of the world with achieving parity. So the question that's being asked is, how do we reconcile this, the fact that women have such a long way to go to be economically empowered still, and actually, social empowerment and economic empowerment go hand in hand, with the fact that women are the influencers. You see women are being the influencers at the level of taking consumer decisions. Suneet, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big question, I would say. But what I would say, what we see in Unilever, and Pfizer, what I'm hearing from Debra, is that women are at the center, and that's plays very well into our DNA, and internally and externally. I think what the challenge is, from what I saw in your study and what I've seen during the course of this conference, is that is not universally true across different sectors of the economy and across different industries. I think what would be interesting for me to know is, while Unilever and Pfizer may have have a greater evolution index, if you will, on where we stand and realize we want to go farther, I don't think that's the case with what I've seen with financial institutions and banks. Okay, and I'm not trying to be critical of the people in this room, I just saw some of the data. And I said, so I think if you're looking at women overall, and you're saying, well, it looks like you're doing well here, and maybe there's more to be done here, how do you make sure that across the spectrum of economic opportunities, across the spectrum of social empowerment, that there's progress being made? Because we may come to you and say, well, we've been targeting women for decades, and we may tell you that we've been targeting different parts of the socioeconomic pyramid also for decades, and we're far along our journey, but much more to go. But how do you make sure that we learn from each other in this way so that everyone can take advantage and progress on the same spectrum? I think that's the challenge that I've seen. And without knowing other industries as well, I can imagine that there are differences, and a systematic, uniform push is what's needed at the grassroots level, but also at the management level, like Debra and I are a part of.
Yeah, and I think also to further build on that, no question, when you look at just the fact that 70% of consumer buying decisions are influenced by women, that's quite significant. But to your point, on the counter, then women are underserved, underrepresented. That's the truth. And the reality is that's both developing and developed markets. Women in both parts of the world believe that, or live that. There are some government regulatory stuff that has to go into play to drive the agenda of women. The UN drives the agenda of women. So those are happening on the side. But I recently read an article that said, if you look at the industries best positioned to get behind women as a whole emerging powerhouse, food, any industry in food, you're in. Healthcare, you're in. Beauty, no brainer, you're in. The other ones, fitness was more developed market, yeah, where if you're in fitness in the developed market, you're in. Less so in emerging markets, the fitness index. Financial services, you're in. Yeah, financial services, you're in, and then lastly, technology, in no specific orders. Those were the industries that are best poised to make a difference in the future. But then when you read about how far we have to go, all those industries pretty much have a long way to go. It was interesting reading, though, in the financial segment, that's the place where women call out the most dissatisfaction, but potentially the highest opportunity. Yeah, so that's the place where they feel that women are not talked to. It's very common, even to myself or my banker to send me something and I'll have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I used to shy away from challenging them, but these days I do it with ease and say, I don't understand anything on your website, I don't understand your online banking, I don't understand anything there. Before they used to send somebody to come and online bank for me, and I think they thought that was rather expensive, and then realized there were many people who were in the same position. Just simplify your languaging. Simplify your languaging. So when you think about best industries that can really get behind this opportunity that's twice the size of India and China, financial segment, you're in, and it's yours for the taking or leaving on the table.
So what I'm hearing is that while you see these inequalities at a macro level, what's happening at a micro level is very different. So the influence that women have over decisions that are made in the household, they may not necessarily always have access to the bank account, or they may not have access to a regular income. But at the level of everyday decisions in the household, women are playing an important role there. And the question is, how do you then build on that to support your product offering? On the topic of women, and you touched on it briefly, you talked about the fact that women are the same and women are different, and they're different segments. But it is worth noting that, and you've talked about A, B, C, D. This isn't just one segment. There are multiple segments here, and I guess one of the answers probably is about using technology and using social media and using these different channels. But how do neither of you probably see women as one segment. How do you differentiate?
Okay. I guess to elaborate on the question, it's more about how do you therefore segment this opportunity.
Yeah.
And there's some baseline processes. There's geographical segmentation, which we do in Unilever. There's no question on that. We still play to geographical segmentation. So that's key for us. Then there's demographic segmentation, where we split the women by income, education. We do that. But then you go a layer up. And that's where it becomes more interesting, and this is where you spend the money on. It becomes now the psychographic segmentation, where you really want to understand her life stage. You really want to understand what drives her in terms of life stage and her lifestyle index. So that's when you start going into psychographics. And you dig even further. I can tell you, when you look at women, for example, we can break it into so many segments. We break them into women who are on the fast track. We break it into women who are struggling, women who are relationship focused, women who are time bound. And when you get into those layers, that's when it starts getting really, really interesting. Women who are on the fast track career perspective, it's about them. They want to get certain products quickly, on time, simply. Women who are focused on relationship are very into experiences. So these are the people who love to go on holiday with their family and do everything for the relationship, etc., etc. And then you target your products to women like that. But then when you go into women who are, for example, struggling, it does not mean that the product you're offering them has got to be cheap. That's where we get mixed up. If the product you're offering them has got to be value add. You've really got to give them the additional value to get behind it. Let me give a very specific example in Unilever. One of the key things we do is soap. We make soap. In its simplest form, we make toilet baths so that people can take a bath. But if you look at that from that perspective, then when you're segmenting, all you may be thinking when you're cracking the emerging market is, let's give them cheap soap. Doesn't work like that. To the people, when a woman is struggling, every single cent that she puts out there has got to give a disproportionate return. So one of our soaps, for example, is Lifebuoy. And one of the things we know about Lifebuoy is it truly saves lives. Because the way we make that soap is to provide a real hygiene soap that fights bacteria and infection. That's what Lifebuoy does. When you understand women and look at what they're looking for, it's not a cheap soap, by the way. It's not a cheap soap. But it does really, really well in the emerging economy. Why? Because the value they put to that soap is significant. Every time a child falls ill and doesn't go to school, that is an impact to the child's future. And the mother thinks like that. So she will buy a product that will stop her or reduce the times the child will fall ill so that they keep going to school and improve their lives of tomorrow. They will pay a premium. That's the thinking about women. Don't just follow on bottom line price. Give them more value than the actual product offering in its own right. Tell them the story. Yeah, that's one of the examples of how we go behind it.
Absolutely. I don't think I can add much to the segmentation. That's the approach that we would take as well. I think that it's easier said than done, which is how do you translate from the facts of the segments, which is occupation, income level, education, family status, how do you translate that into the psychographics as you described, which is what are their motivations, what are the intentions, what are the goals, what are the aspirations of your target consumer? That's a big challenge to make that leap, and it takes time and a commitment to get there, because that understanding, that deep knowledge will allow you to translate that intent into the Lifebuoy example. That'll allow you to say, how do I create something that is extremely relevant, relatable and identifiable, and essentially meeting the need of that target consumer. Ultimately, I think between all this data and the actual insight is a really smart person who can translate that and make it actionable from your own organization. I think one thing we've tried to do in Pfizer, just to add on this, is to create and elevate that insights function within our company, but not as a function, but even as a capability, and as a differentiated capability, and then ultimately as part of our culture. Because ultimately, all of our companies are big companies, all of us have smart people working there, we want the best for our colleagues and for the consumers we serve, but in the end, this is something that differentiates. Your ability to translate that in insight, your ability to act on that, make it a true differentiating capability, your ability to weave that into the fabric of your values and of your culture of your organization. That is where segmentation ultimately will take you. And I think that is a very big challenge, but with a commitment, it can be done.
I'll give an example of somebody else who does it really well, and my apologies up front to Claire of Vodacom. But we learned, it's Unilever, we learned not just from consumer packaged goods, not just from ourselves, but from others who do that really well. It doesn't have to be that complex. Vodacom and their M-Pesa platform, which is their money market, it was a brilliant idea. They didn't design a product first and then shove it down. They understood the needs of what the consumer out there was looking for. They were looking for convenience and they were looking for value. Real life example, I'm Kenyan by background. My grandmother used M-Pesa probably 4 or 5 years ahead of me getting onto it. Why? First and foremost, it has nothing to do with education. Absolutely not. It was Vodacom gave a product that truly was going to make a difference to their lives. So what she realized is she can have money banking on a phone. She doesn't have to travel so many kilometers to pay for services in another part of the town. So she was more than happy paying the extra premium for money transfer. And to me, when you first looked at it, I would say, why are you paying 35 shillings when in a bank it will cost you 10 shillings just to keep it there. But then she said, because in a bank, they'll charge me 10 shillings, but I'm going to pay 100 shillings to drive 10 kilometers to go and pay for something. Man, Vodacom cracked it by looking at the whole chain and realizing the extra value that they're going to create, consumers will pay more for it. So just understanding what the consumer needs are and who it is you're targeting can make a huge difference in terms of the philosophy of offering products, pricing products, etc.
One last question. I mean, you've talked about technology, and everybody always talks about technology being the hope of bridging the gap, of leapfrogging. But we do know that technology hasn't reached all the way. So even when we look at access to technology, right? Often the women who are unbanked, who are underbanked, also don't have access to technology. What are some of the other channels that you've used or advice you would give to financial institutions to getting closer to women who don't necessarily yet have the access to technology?
I think you're right, technology hasn't hit everywhere. But then again, also when you're thinking about technology, don't overcomplicate it. Yeah? Work with what they have. When it comes to technology, if it's mobile phones and it's just feature phones or normal phones that they have, work with that. M-Pesa, by the way, runs on regular phones because they didn't make you shift the technology, they worked with what you already have. So I wouldn't write off technology from the perspective of what consumers may already have. But the reality is, when you look beyond that, we know word of mouth is key. I won't belabor the point. Word of mouth can actually be the interactions that you have on a face-to-face with consumers and all that. We know that is key. We also know that the point of purchase, wherever you're going to buy a product, is really key for women consumers. Really, really key. That's where you can make a difference. Yeah? At the point of sale or point of purchase, whether it's at your banking hall or whether it's at the supermarket, don't assume that's just brick and mortar. That's where you can talk to your consumer. That's where women will listen, they will watch, they will look at what you're doing. Even the imagery you have in there will tell them you're talking to me. Even the person you have across the till will tell them you're talking to me. Don't underestimate the in-store experience or the in-bank experience and how that can truly create a difference in experience to women as a customer. So I would encourage you to really look at how you play with. Don't write off technology, but work with what they have. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. In-store experience, really get behind utilizing that space to make a difference, whether it's the people who work in there or whatever you can do with that space as a media, get behind that. And then lastly, word of mouth, whether it's on ground or online, really get behind that space.
Suneet, parting advice, if there were two things you would say to financial institutions that they should consider doing now, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say, and I opened up with some of this, make the case for change. That case will carry you and sustain you forward as you revise your strategies and set the imperatives for the organization. That is absolutely critical. In the end, at least we are businesses, however, there is an ability to impact society in a different way, and one feeds the other, and is a natural byproduct of the other. But making that case on both a quantitative and a qualitative point of view will carry you very far. And then secondly, translate that into an institutional action. Not a sideline activity, but a real part of the organization which is fully dedicated and focused on realizing that opportunity.
Debra?
I would say forward thinking and innovation. Don't live in yesterday, don't live in today, think about tomorrow. Otherwise you will be out of business. Forward thinking and innovation. Look beyond your organizational walls. 2, defend your territory for growth and diversification. Really defend your territory. The world is changing. If some players are taking it away from you, partner with them. I.e., if you're in the traditional banking, partner with the mobile banking guys who are getting into there and vice versa. Partner, don't stand still. Defend your territory for growth. 3, bigger is not always better. There's sometimes some things people do better than yourselves. If you're a big organization, Unilever is a big organization, but there are times we recognize we have to play with partners and agencies who are more agile on the ground, and we do. because that bigger is not always better. And then lastly, when you're talking to women, doing well by doing good. Women want that. Doing well by doing good. Serve ethical companies. Don't get into social responsibility because of getting into social responsibility. Get into it because this market, doing well by doing good, is so significant. Whatever your product is, whatever your service is, do well by doing good. And that's it from my end.
So I would like to thank my panelists. I'm hoping that they've given us lots of food for thought and lots of inspiration for how we take the discussion forward over the next 2 days.
Thank you.